So anyhow, that's how my dad and my mom met and became husband and wife.
Okay.
And then there was the adoption of my sister, and then approximately
7 years later.
I came over. Now by that time, my dad had owned, I'm thinking 3 restaurants in that time period, because the first Chinese restaurant he owned was in downtown Schenectady with another gentleman. And then he sold that and then moved up a little bit. So he had Schenectady and he had Albany. So if this was Schenectady, his next move was kind of up to a little bit further north or further west, or
East.
closer towards
Albany is east of Schenectady.
Yeah, I always kind of mess it up. So, and that's why I'm a real estate agent, because I know my directions. But so you moved up towards Schenectady, and then a little further each time period on that. So anyhow, that was the situation, as he had owned a few restaurants, and it was interesting too. Apparently, in that time period, because of World War II and everything, my dad had to actually have a card that said essentially that I'm not Japanese.
Okay. So did he become a citizen?
Yeah, okay, so we'll fast forward that a little bit there. So I'm gonna say at the late 50s and just around the early 60s, he was still an illegal immigrant or alien, whichever word you want to use. And in that time period, the laws of the United States says that you could not vote, you could not own a business, and you could not own a house because you were not a legal immigrant. Well, somehow my dad was able to do all 3.
I don't know what the rules were then. Today the issue is financing on a house.
Okay.
I think you could buy a house, but how you get it financed becomes a challenge if you're not a U.S. citizen. I've run into that. I had one of my reverse mortgage borrowers. Husband was a U.S. citizen with a Social Security number. His wife was not a citizen, did not have a Social Security number, couldn't do a loan for him because FHA required husband and wife to be on the loan, and because she didn't have a Social Security number, she had a taxpayer identification number because she was filing taxes.
Oh, okay.
Did not have a social and couldn't get the loan done under those circumstances. And I don't know what the rules were in the 60s. I don't even know what they are today. So it's irrelevant because it doesn't impact me personally.
Yeah.
But that's my experience tangling up, and I've done some other loans for non-citizens who had the right kind of visa so that they could, but those become interesting. It's a tangled mess to deal with.
Well, I was too young, but whatever the case was, at least that's what my sister told me, and a little bit of my dad was that he actually wasn't allowed to do anything.
So if you were born in Hong Kong and adopted, how did that process work for you, or did it?
Well, okay, so the short answer is my dad and I got our citizenship essentially the same time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so and there was time periods, and again a little bit hazy. I could be off because you know how family stories are; they don't always line up quite right. But essentially, you had to go through a process where minimum you were in the United States for 5 years, etc. And I actually might have been in the States for 5 years. But the bottom line was this, is that my dad had said to some of his friends, I really wish I could go back to Hong Kong or China, but I can't. And his friends originally said, well, sure you can. We'll show you how to do airplane reservations and all that type of stuff. He says, no, I'm an illegal alien. If I step out of the United States, they're not going to let me back in, which really surprised my dad's friends. Well, because my dad was a very successful businessman, and he did everything that most people did. He joined the Rotary Club, the Chambers of Commerce and stuff. So he ran into a number of people who said they wanted to help him. And we're going, as he's telling me this story, I'm getting a little bit older. We're like, how the heck did you do it? Turns out that some of his friends were were state representatives.
Okay.
Okay. And in fact, I think one of them was I think was a state senator for the U.S. Congress.
Okay, U.S. Senator.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, but at least that's the story I was told. And but the way he said it is, he goes, well, you know, I own a restaurant. I do pretty good, and these people come and visit me, and I give them food. You know, I don't charge them much, or sometimes I do free, or they have parties. So when I told them I had this problem, they were surprised, and they said, Jack, we can help you. They did. So apparently immigrations wanted to deport my father, but because of the representatives and et cetera, they essentially said, go pound sand. This guy is actually contributing to the community. He's paying taxes. In fact, he pays more taxes than some people. Go find somebody else, and whatever adjustments that had to be made, it was taken care of. And so I do remember standing up, saying, you know, the Pledge of Allegiance, and getting my citizenship. And I believe my dad on the same day also got on that. So that's how our family ended up becoming citizens of the United States and law-abiding and all that type of stuff. So you know, kind of a roundabout story from your.
No, it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
So you know nothing of your birth mother or birth father.
I have a certificate that has the name of my birth mother and father from Hong Kong, but I've never pursued it. People have always asked me why I didn't pursue it, and my answer was, my past doesn't make my present makes my future. So I always said I was, you know, given an opportunity. I'm just going to assume that I was given up for adoption to the Catholic orphanage because they thought I would have a better chance. They didn't hold on to me. That's the viewpoint that I take, whether it's true or not.
I agree.
So
good story. So you grew up in
upstate New York.
Upstate New York, Albany, Schenectady area.
Yeah.
The Tri-Cities are Albany, Schenectady, and Troy.
Troy, correct, exactly. So.
That's where I went to school.
Was it? Okay. Which school did you go to?
Rensselaer.
Okay, sure. So you know that place. Don's giving me grief here. He knows the directions and all that. He's letting me rattle on about going left and right and north and south when it's actually east and west or whatever. But the situation.
Yes, I've been there once before.
Okay. So so my dad had restaurants in that area, and he was actually very well known. And part of the reason is his restaurants, when he had the ability, he changed the restaurant's name to Jack's Restaurant, because he didn't want to say Chinese restaurant, because back then it was really exotic food to eat Chinese food.
Right.
So this way, if he said Jack's Restaurant, people would come in. Of course, they would be a little surprised, but once they got in the door, they go, well, let's try it and see. And back then, Chinese food, unlike today, was truly known as American Chinese food. So what we advertised is that we had steaks, turkey dinners, roast chicken and stuff like that. And then when they came in the door and they saw the menu, there was all the American favorites and then some Chinese food, which was really American Chinese food, not really Chinese food. But because it was so different, people thought it was real Chinese.
That's what he could sell.
Yeah. And that's where you had, like, you know, fried rice, okay, we all understand.
Right.
You know, or chop suey was basically chopped vegetables,
right,
mushrooms and stuff like that, you know, just cooked with different sauce and different things. So over time, you know, people said, oh, this is really good Chinese food. And so anyhow, he was known in the area as having one of the best restaurants and one of the best Chinese in the Tri-City area. That's how he became pretty successful in the restaurant business in Albany and Schenectady. And then a side note, I mean, if you want to go back, the place that my parents decided to move into the neighborhood, there was actually a protest.
When they moved in?
Yeah, when they moved in, because they were Chinese.
Okay.
And they actually tried to find a way to.
What year would this have been?
This probably would have been, again, it would be probably in the early 50s.
Okay.
There, because in that whole area, that area was predominantly
okay
on there, and there were not that many in the Albany Connect. But my dad persevered, and we were able to build. I said we. I wasn't even there yet, but he was able to have a home built in that area, and that was one of the better school districts. He understood that you tried to get into a good area, and so he did get in there. And in fact, our neighbors, who ended up being our best friends, was one of the more vocal people who wanted to kick out my dad, move in. In fact, they tried to pay him. Pretty interesting.
And then they became friends?
Yeah, pretty interesting too.
Your dad's quite a politician, huh?
Oh yeah, he's, well, I guess you have to, from jumping out of the lion's den to jumping into,
Well,
jumping to buildings and then jumping into neighborhoods that were not going to let you in.
So you had a good sales teacher in your early days.
I guess so, who knows?
But then from there, you spent your school years in Schenectady area.
Right, actually the suburb I was in, or the town, was called Niskayuna.
Okay.
On that. Now in that area, as in most of the United States, that area was inhabited by Indians. So up in that area we had the Mohawks, the Iroquois, and a few others that I don't remember, but those are the two that, just like out here in Denver, you had the different Indian tribes and stuff like that. So Niskayuna is a Indian name as far as I know, and that was one of the I'm going to say neighborhoods that had a very good school.
Okay.
So that's educated.
So you went through high school there.
I went through high school. Well, actually, let's see. When I was about 9 or 10, I think it was, yeah. I actually went back to Hong Kong because my mom wanted to go to Hong Kong. Okay. So I was in Hong Kong for about 2 years, and then I came back.
Oh.
So what happened then is, so I was in kindergarten and I think first grade in the Niskayuna, but then my dad had a restaurant up between Albany and Schenectady. It's known as Colony. Right. So for a year or two, I was in the Colony school system. Okay. Then I went back to the Niskayuna school system. Then I went to Hong Kong, and then I came back and went into the Niskayuna school system. And then because I was, I'm going to be nice to myself because this is my history. I was a little bit of a ruffian and not good at, not willing to conform to the school system. Okay. So my dad sent me away to a prep school to get me straightened out. So I went to a prep school in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. Okay. It was known as Williston Academy. Okay. While I was there, they merged with the women's school, which was Northampton School. Well, one day after, I think it was after my sophomore year, the headmaster called my dad and said, "Mr. Fung, we're not going to let you." Okay. So I was not the good immigrant child when it comes to education. So I actually didn't go to high school for 4 years in Niskayuna. I actually went in my junior and senior year. Okay. Yeah.
So you're bilingual.
Not so much anymore because I don't use Chinese as much as I did. And but when I was when I was raised, I spoke Cantonese at home with my mom. I did not speak it with my dad because the school system said you got to stop talking Chinese. And back when I was young, the school system enabled me to actually have a private tutor because there weren't that many people that needed private tutors. Okay. So the school system had enough money to train me in proper English
as a second language. Because you would have learned Chinese in Hong Kong. Right. Although there was plenty of English spoken in China.
Yeah, but I went to a Chinese school in Hong Kong.
So how'd you like the shark fin soup in Hong Kong?
Oh, I love, well, I'm from a restaurant background. I love all types of food, pretty much. And it was really funny because when I was in Hong Kong, it's kind of weird because back then as a kid, you always want to be part of a group. I said, oh, finally, I'll have, quote, my own kind accept me, because being Chinese and in this community got a lot of, well, when I got back to China, they didn't accept me because
Yeah.
I wasn't Chinese enough.
No, you're now American.
Yeah, I'm American. So my best friend that I always talked to was my teacher, because she wanted to learn English.
Okay.
So my second or third grade teacher, whatever, she would always talk to me. She ended up being my best friend.
Okay.
Until I left Hong Kong and came back to the United States.
Okay.
On that. So anyhow,
So you had trouble learning English in Hong Kong?
I didn't have to learn any English.
No, I mean your teacher was in Hong Kong.
Oh, she spoke English, but she didn't have the chance to really practice.
Oh, okay.
So, she would practice with me, and she'd be considered like a lovely lady. I thought the world.
Okay.
And I like most kids, I remember when I went back many years later, stopping off at the elementary school and seeing the little student desk, how small they were and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I was not the best student. Actually, I think in my junior year, I had like a 1.87, which is somewhere between C and D, or maybe D plus, C minus, I don't know.
Yeah.
So somebody that turned me around was actually a Spanish teacher, because when you go into high school, you have to pick a language. And so at the Chinese restaurant, I asked one of the waiters, which language should I take? And he was actually Cuban Chinese.
Okay.
So he said, take Spanish, because Spanish is spreading, that you're going to find in the future. A lot of people are going to do Spanish. But he had the choice of Spanish, German, I forgot what, French.
French.
I think those were the choices. So I ended up picking Spanish. So in high school, my Spanish teacher said, you're really a bright kid, but your grades suck. If you don't do something, you're not going to get in. He kind of straightened me out. So the last half of my sophomore year and my senior year, I actually was a student. You want to keep going on the education part?